Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show on Bog Radio. This is the Comedy in the Kingdom Tour edition, where we invite a comedian, a Christian comedian, onto the show and chop it up and just talk all things comedy for about 60 minutes. So get your cup of hot coffee ready and your honey bun or your muffin and enjoy the conversation. This morning, we have a very special guest on the show, a friend to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show, breaking down the Four Walls edition. Also, this is a Christian comedian that offers, of course, clean humor, Christian values, and a message that both encourages and inspires. She just completed a Drybar comedy special shot in Provo, Utah. You can also catch her this summer in Paducah, Kentucky, with comedian Jeff Allen. With no further ado, please welcome to the show, June Vaughn Colson. What's up, June? How are you?
Hey, Maurice. So excited to be here with you tonight. Thanks, or this morning, I guess. Thanks for letting me hang out with you.
Yes, it's good to have you on the show, and we've had you on Breaking Down the Four Walls many times with our buddies Fifi Frazier and Michelle Van Dusen and Dave Ebert and Cornbread, and the list goes on and on and on. But you've been a very busy beaver over the last, 6 to 12 months touring and doing stand-up. And as I mentioned, you just completed the shooting of a Drybar comedy special in Provo, Utah recently. Tell us about how that went down.
Oh, man, it was so good. So I flew in on a Wednesday. I was filming on Friday, and it was about 8 hours worth of travel. So I just came in a couple days early. That way I could rest. Spent Thursday just walking around Provo, talking to myself, practicing my set. I do better because I have attention deficit. I can't sit still when I practice.
Yeah.
And so it was beautiful weather, just unseasonably warm. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to walk around this little downtown area, pass all the shops, and just kind of talk to myself and practice and just enjoy the mountain view that's all around you. And then again on Friday before the show, I did the same thing, got up, just, spent some time in the Word, spent some time in prayer, and took my practice walk again. And and just got ready, man. I've been to Provo before. I've been to a Drybar recording before when my friend Rhonda Corey and my friend Haas Ridgway was recording. Mm-hmm. My friend Andrea Kaspari, she was recording the day after them. So I was able to have an inside peek at what it's like to be there.
Yeah.
And so, the unknown is usually the scariest part. And I felt like I was very familiar with the process before I got there, but got there and straight to hair and makeup, recording little clips for them, recording your tip video, and hanging on till it was go time.
Now, what was the crowd like there? Did you get a big crowd?
Yes, no, they had a great crowd. The whole bottom level was completely full for both shows. There was a 6:30 show and then a 9:30 show. And the 6:30 show, that audience was on fire. They just, they're the type that when you walked out, they're whistling. People who can whistle are doing the high pitch, woo, and they're, just super hype when you come out. What was cool is that Angel Studios is back to broadcasting live for people who have certain subscriptions to Angel Studios.
Yeah, sure. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so my friend Rhonda Corey has that subscription, my friend Michelle, my friend Lauren. So several of them were able to actually watch me in my first set as I performed that first round.
Now, I actually, either I have it and I don't know it, or I know I watched a comedian do his Drybar live. And I don't know, maybe 5-6 months ago, but I probably have that subscription to Angel Studios because it came right up on my YouTube, and or maybe I have a subscription to Drybar on my YouTube. Maybe that's probably what it is. But it's really cool now, though, like you said, that you can see a comedian perform live doing their Drybar. It's really
Yes.
cool. And you can interact and make comments on the side and all that, which is really cool. How many were in the audience, June?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking that lower level probably holds 75. It's
Okay.
very intimate. It's just a really tight space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that first audience, I mean, a lot of those people, there's some people who just come to every show. They just show up for every show. They know what's going down. They know that it's meant to be fun, that it's being recorded, that they have a job too, to be energetic and just let loose and have fun with us. And that first set, it was absolutely like that. Adam Mueller is the name of the first comedian who went out. He had a killer set. The audience was on fire. He was on fire, so it just elevated the room up. So when I came out, I mean, it was mine to lose, so
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were ready, man. As soon as I came out, they were ready to rock and roll. Wellington, a comedian out of Atlanta, he was the last comic, and he had a phenomenal set. They just rode along. I will tell you, my first set, you got a little more of the jitters. I had changed some things up. I had done some different transitions. So I wasn't concerned about necessarily remembering my material. I was just worried about having a blank spot where I had changed it and changed the flow of it in a way that I thought would go better. But I had only performed it in that particular order maybe 3 times at the most.
Okay.
Before I went on. And so my concern was that I was going to miss something. My first round, I missed one joke, which is fine. It wasn't my, sometimes you come off and you're like, oh, I forgot my favorite joke,
Yeah.
But it wasn't that. It was just kind of a extra joke in one of the bits that I do, and I forgot to do it. So the beauty is you get to record again. You do a second round.
Yeah.
So the first audience was just popping. The second audience was really good, not the same energy, but I had a better set because I had just done it. You get those jitters out, and then you do the second. So it was really difficult because they allow you to give kind of your suggestions. They'll do what they want to, in post-production, but they allow you to say, hey, I missed this joke in set 1. It's in set 2. Would you, put it in? Because they'll edit and move some things around. The last set, I got a standing ovation. So they'll put that, they should anyway, they'll put that, whether they use the first version or the second, they'll make sure that that's in there. So, man, it was all the way around an amazing night, an amazing experience.
Well, congratulations to you on the Drybar comedy special. You have coming up this summer in Paducah, Kentucky, your very own stomping grounds, more or less, for the most part, with comedian Jeff Allen, who is an awesome stand-up comic. Tell us about this show.
Yeah, so it's the Kentucky Comedy Festival. They had their very first festival last year, and the director of the festival reached out to me, and so, apparently somebody put me on his radar. He wanted to bring in more Kentucky comics this year, so he reached out, talked to me about doing the festival in October, and then maybe a few weeks later, he called back and said, he didn't want to wait until October to do the next one. He wanted to kind of do something on the in between because it had such good momentum over the summer. And so, over in October. And so he said, I've booked this comedian. I'm not sure if you know him. His name is Jeff Allen. I think you'd be a great combination with him. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of familiar with Jeff.
Yes.
Very familiar.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm a little bit, just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I just ate cheesecake at his house, about a month ago. So I am pretty familiar with Jeff. Yeah. So I'm excited. Anytime I get to work with Jeff, he's been a huge influence in my just comedy career. But even more than that, just a genuine friend to me, somebody that I just care for deeply, and just by the grace of God, he was placed in my life. And yeah, and so anytime that I get to share a stage with a mentor and a friend, you just can't get much better than that. So,
Oh
I mean,
no,
I wouldn't tell the director. I would have done it for free. You know what I mean? To work with Jeff, but
that part we won't bring out. We'll leave that part out. But yes, you love it that much. We love stand up that much. And I think last year there was a tour. I think it's called, correct me if I'm wrong, the School Teachers Comedy Tour, which was included Leslie Robb. Now, you and Christy Conder have partnered with Leslie Robb to do some stand up. Tell us about that.
yes. Okay. So what Leslie is involved in is called the Board Teachers Tour.
Got
It's
it.
Board
That's it.
Teachers
Right.
Comedy. And it's, as far as I know, it's going international now. And they have
Whoa.
a huge platform. They sell out theaters all over the country. And she's part of a really powerhouse lineup in the Board Teachers Tour. What Leslie, Christy and I did together was partnered with the Christian Educators of America. And so the Christian Educators partnered with different churches to bring in clean comedy and encouragement for the teachers in their community. And so we were able to do a show with them, a partner with them. But now what Leslie, Christy, and I are doing is called the Epic Tour. And it is just basically encouragement for women. So it's not just teachers, it's anybody. And it's a night of comedy and encouragement for the women in, whatever church, whatever area that we happen to be in. So I will be in Kentucky, Michigan, Texas. I think now outside of Memphis, we just booked a show there. So yeah, it's the Epic Tour, and it's with Christy Conder, Leslie Robb comedy, and then Junebug comedy as well.
I love it. I love it. Awesome stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show on Bog Radio. This is the Comedy in the Kingdom edition with comedian June Vaughn Colson. And June, as I say all of that, you also are the opener for the Mike Huckabee show, or you do so occasionally. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, what a cool experience to get to be able be a part of a television program that's being filmed. Yeah, I do the crowd warm up. So basically, we're kind of the canary that they send out to see what kind of life is out there in the audience.
Right.
So it's definitely a different setting than going to a club or going to a church or a place that is for comedy. Our role is basically to just get their attention, to loosen them up a little bit. And it gives the Governor Huckabee, it gives the governor an opportunity to just feel out what the audience is like for that night. It just gives them that general idea. He loves comedy, Christian comedy. Shonda Pierce is one of his dearest friends. He just has a true respect for Christian comedians and gives a lot of opportunity to a lot of comedians to come onto a show. So yeah, I get to go do that. The last round was really fun. It was a little chaotic and a little back and forth because sometimes it's the regular pattern. They bring the audience in, they welcome them, they play this video that tells the history of the theater. Then the comedian comes out and you're kind of like, hey, liven up, here we go. And then your job is done.
Yes.
But every once in a while, they'll have a musical act, or I've been there when there was a friend of mine was doing the warm up where there was an acrobat that was like spinning from the ceiling and those kind of things. So sometimes they're moving pianos in, they're breaking sets down from magicians. So sometimes you bounce out again and you're just kind of keeping them warmed up and keep their attention while they're breaking down the set and those kind of things. But this last round, it was very surreal. Sarah Palin was one of the guests.
Okay.
And she was hanging out in the green room with us. And there was a wild bird rescue group that was there. And they had hawks and owls and all of these animals. So I'm in the green room with Sarah Palin. She's holding an owl. Yeah. And I go out and perform with the Oak Ridge Boys sitting in the front row. Like, you never know who's going to be there.
Yes.
It's crazy, but it's so much fun. And the governor is, and the whole crew at the Huckabee show they just treat you like family, and just make you feel at home. I always feel just really special when I get to be there. So yeah, I think that was maybe the fourth time they've given me an opportunity to be there. So yeah, I hope to have more opportunities in the future.
Well, June, God bless you. You're a Christian comedian, and I'd be interested in allowing you to share with our audience how you got started in stand up. And was there ever a point where you started out as a secular comic and transitioned to clean/Christian, or you've always been a clean Christian comedian?
Oh, wow. So it's definitely an interesting journey for me. Comedy had always been a part of my life. To quote my dad, who goes by the name Hot Dog, anybody who hears my comedy hears me talk about Hot Dog.
Yes.
To quote Hot Dog, he said, in our family, we have always used comedy to smooth out the rough spots.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of rough spots in my life, in my childhood, in my dad's life. I grew up in low-income housing and government housing with a mom who was emotionally unstable. Her mother was bipolar. My dad had a lot of addictions, was laid off from work a lot, battled depression, suicidal tendencies. It was a lot. But the one thing in all the brokenness that we had was a great sense of humor. But I grew up around a lot of really rough people. So the jokes that were being slung around me were not clean jokes.
Okay.
Growing up poor, growing up in rough environments, I literally lived 2 doors down from a gentleman's club. I lived next door to drug dealers, just in really, really rough environments.
Wow.
So as a kid, before I had a relationship with Christ, I defended myself with comedy. That's how I protected myself. I had about 10 different jokes that could shut a guy down in a minute if they were to come at me.
Yeah.
And then, fast forward to adulthood and having Christ in my life and in my heart, that kind of crude humor and language was gone. But I still had the ability to help people in tough situations with the comic relief, with the brutal honesty, and with the comic relief. So one day, 2017, I come into church and I have my Bible, and nobody was singing, nothing had happened yet. There wasn't some dramatic moment that was going on around me. I literally was just sitting down, organizing my pew, because I'm a Baptist and we have our own pews, my pew.
Yeah.
And when I sat down just before service, I literally heard the Holy Spirit say, "I want you to write." And that was it. That was all I heard. I want you to write. But I remember feeling almost just like electricity. Like I physically felt a presence on me. And that was spoke to my heart. I want you to write. And I remember being so rattled by it, Maurice. I didn't know what to do with that information. I realized that I had tears coming out of my eyes. Like I didn't know what was happening in that moment. So I got up, I went to the back of the church. My husband, my kids are in the pew. They have no idea where I went. After church, we get home and my husband's like, what is going on with you? And I tell him, I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but this is, before church. And I felt the Lord say, I want you to write. And I don't know what to do. And my husband said, I think you should write. That's pretty simple, right, Maurice?
Yeah. I think you should write.
Yes. But then I was like, what? God, what is it? What do you want me to write? And so for almost a year, I just went back and forth with the Lord going, what is it? What do you want me to write? What, almost daily, because I knew I had a few moments in my life where the Lord spoke to my heart in very, very, very specific ways. And this was one of those. It was undeniable. So one day I was headed to work, and in this quiet time on this country stretch of the road, I heard the Holy Spirit say, it's comedy. It's always been comedy, June. It's always been comedy. But what I realized is it took that long to hear God's call on me, because I kept kind of going, give me direction, 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 direction. I wanted God to give me direction. And he was going to give me direction when I got focused on my connection, right?
There you go. Yes.
So when the vertical connection happened, when I really started getting into the word and like seeking God's will for my life and reading and just talking to him every day, then eventually I heard him again. And so my mama used to always say, you never ask God for a sign. Don't you ever ask him for a sign. But I'm like, comedy, God, like stand-up comedy? You mean me like on a Zany's comedy? And I'm like, Mama said never ask for a sign, Lord, but I kind of feel like I need a sign that this is actually what you're saying. And I kid you not, Maurice, I get to the end of the road at a red light. The light turns green. I always look left or right, even when my light is green.
Yeah.
I look, I don't see anybody coming. I pull out in the intersection, and this dually pickup truck comes barreling down the road, blows the red light, and nearly takes off the front of my car.
Wow.
And at that point, I was like, okay, Mom was right. No more signs. I want no more signs. But it was that fast. And then I would tell you from there, I started praying. I'm like, okay, God, I don't know anybody who does this. I don't know how to do it, but if this is what you want me to do, I'm going to need you to send someone, help guide me, help me show me how this works. So at the time, the Christian Comedy Association had a Facebook page. And so I looked up to see, like, is there anybody there, right, that's out there? And so I put my testimony, I found their page and I put my testimony on there, and I was like, this is what's going on. I don't have a joke written. I don't know if anybody else has had this experience. But within 24 hours, this lady, her name is Cheryl. She goes by Peppy Garrett. She had been a comedian for about 10 years at that time, I think.
Okay.
She read my testimony, sent me a message on Messenger and said, this is my testimony. Your testimony is my testimony.
Mm-hmm.
And then she sent me a video clip of her sharing her testimony. And by that evening, she had called me and she's like, look, they have a conference. You need to go to the conference. And I'm like, okay, I can't go to a conference and I'm not even a comedian. I don't have a joke written. I haven't told my family. I haven't told my husband. I'm just trying to figure this thing out. I look it up, Maurice, and the Christian Comedy Association was meeting in Nashville, which is basically my back door.
Yeah.
On my birthday weekend.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And a sign.
Absolutely. So at this point, I'm like, okay, God, I get it. I share with my husband. My husband's like, okay, this is crazy, but whatever, go with God, do your thing, sis. I mean, he was supportive. He was supportive right out of the gate. He didn't get it either. Neither one of us, knew what to do with that. But what was interesting, I kept telling God, I'm like, he's not going to get it. God, he's not going to get it. I was scared to death to tell Jason about it. And then when I finally did, we're driving down the road and I'm crying. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but this is what God's calling me to do. I know it's out of my comfort zone. And as soon as I get done, he gets really quiet and he looks over and he goes, I don't get it. And I'm like, see, God, I told you he wasn't going to get it.
Yeah.
But then one beat later, he goes, but I see it. I don't get it, but I see it. And then he starts explaining to me how he said, as soon as you told me that, he said, all I could see was last weekend at the baseball game.
Okay.
And what he was referring to was we had a couple friends that were there. They were going through a hard time. It was a husband, wife, and their daughter. And there was, their family had experienced a tragedy. And I came over there just being my goofy self. And they were laughing. I got them laughing about just something dumb that I did and just telling them the story of like just how, how I don't do life right.
Yeah.
And he said, that's all I could see. He said, I've seen you do that 1,000 times. I've seen you just light up a room and make people laugh. And yeah, so I assume that that's something God definitely could use in you. So thus began the journey. I went to the CCA. I thought I'd hide. And because I thought I'll check it off the box, right? Okay, God, I'll go. And I
Yeah,
was
I
so
was there.
uncomfortable. Felt so awkward. I didn't know who the people were. I had no
Yeah.
idea who Shonda Pierce was, or Tim Hawkins, or, you know, Michael Jr., or any of those people. I didn't grow up in that culture. You
Yeah.
know, you don't live next door to a gentleman's club and grow up in the church culture, right? Like
Exactly.
it was just a rough childhood. And so I didn't know who people. I was just kind of hiding in the back, trying to learn what I could. Then I thought, okay, I'll check it off the box, and I'll be like, okay, God, I went, and then that'll be it, Maurice. I'll never have to do anything else again. And here we are, 7 years later, and he has surprised me. He has guided me. He has protected me. He has lifted me out of the sad, I just bombed gutter. Are you sure, God, this is what you want me to do? And yeah, so that's how the journey began. That's how we got here.
Well, June, that's quite a story. And 7 years, you're, in my opinion, are on a pretty fast track to success. 7 years is not a ton of time, but yet you are where you are, which suggests that God is is the one that called you, and you answered the call. And as we look at stand-up comedy in our world today, and coming out of the pandemic in particular, I think comedy has kind of changed on some levels. We have a common friend by the name of Donnie the Entertainer, Donnie Stopa, who's been on Breaking Down Four Walls a few times. He did a documentary called Comedy versus the Cancel Culture. It has not been released on a platform as of yet. He's in contract talks about that, but he does have a documentary that he has completed. I want to play the documentary for you, and we're going to come back and talk about it because, again, it relates to the perception, the public perception of stand-up comedy in 2024. Let's play the trailer. Okay, well, maybe we won't play the trailer. We'll come back and we'll try to.
It was frozen on Jeff's. I love it was frozen on Jeff's face.
In comedy, do you think that cancel culture exists in comedy?
Basically, in a nutshell.
Definitely feel like, as bizarre as it sounds, like there's a war on jokes right now.
Cancel culture, it's such a misdirected umbrella term. You can't police what is subjective.
Oh, wow! Like, you kind of have to live your life bulletproof now. You just have to.
Greatest night in the history of television.
You can't say an inappropriate joke that doesn't have the right context.
There's always going to be some sliver of cancel culture, of woke, of political correctness.
You're not funny, and this is how you have to do the joke, because I know how funny jokes work. That's not the joke.
I don't believe people get canceled. I believe that they have a shift in their audience.
Put your hands together for Mr. Joe Rogan!
When people say somebody is canceled, I think it just means, oh, we found they did or said something that most people don't like.
I date a lot of bimbos. That's the problem, man.
So what?
So, let's think about that joke in today's culture.
Let's indeed think about that joke in today's culture. And Donnie Stopa did this documentary, and I think it's interesting because we are in a cancel culture world now. I mean, legitimately. And I think for the Christian comedian, which is kind of weird, but very true at the same time, the onus is probably more on the Christian comedian to not offend than the secular comedian when you're talking about subject matter that you may be willing to get into. But after watching that trailer, What do you think the public perception is of stand-up comedy in 2024?
I'm kind of a positive person. And I really feel like, especially after the pandemic and everything that everybody went through, I feel like there's more of a thirst for comedy now. I feel like comedy's really booming. Even at the Drybar special, Wellington, the comic out of Atlanta,
Wellington Cuckoo.
Yes, he and I had this conversation, just getting to see so many things kind of popping off with comedy, and even clean comedy, out of Nashville. Nate Bargatze, he hosted Saturday Night Live.
How awesome. That was awesome.
Yeah, he did such a great job, and I think clean comedy has had a bad rap for a long time because people have assumed that clean can't be funny. But then if they really look at some of the most successful, Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno, Nate Bargatze, right? These are clean comics.
Yes.
These are household names,
Absolutely.
But I'm kind of like the woman in the documentary who's like, okay, who canceled who? It may slow some people down and may redirect who their audience is. But even with Drybar, even with this special that I just did, a couple of friends seeing the material I was doing, they were already looking at, well, who's going to be offended by what? Like, what could they be? I do a joke about tasing my kids. Do I really tase my kids? No. But is somebody out there probably going to comment in the comments about child abuse? Likely, right? Because there are certain people who look to be offended.
Yeah.
I don't believe that that's the majority of people. I believe that the loudest ones are who are getting the attention.
Yes.
And for the most part, most people get a joke, can take a joke. But I do believe that Christian beliefs, those take a hit a lot quicker than some of the crazy stuff that I've heard at the comedy clubs. It's like you can talk about all kinds of subject matter in graphic ways and violence and those types of things, but certain Christian beliefs, that'll get people fired up before an abuse joke will. So I don't know. I know who called me into comedy. I know how I'm supposed to do it. And I know that there are some people who are still going to be offended. Even Christians I did a joke about my dad, Hot Dogs Pyro Show. And I did it on the Huckabee show because it was 4th of July. Yeah. And one of the guests on the show was actually the pyrotechnic people who were doing the show in Nashville.
Okay.
And so I did this bit about my dad and how a rain delay didn't even stop his trailer park show. It just meant he had more time to drink and more time to think. And and so I talked about how he lights his face on fire every year, because his left hand's he burns the left side of his beard off because his left hand's his lighting hand, and his right hand was his beverage hand, so that stayed protected. And there was a church that saw a clip of that who had invited me to come do an event, and suddenly I got crickets. And eventually I got a hold of somebody. I'm like, I have you on the schedule. I've held the date. What are we doing? And then it became this whole, are you really a Christian? And where do you go to church? And we don't glorify alcohol.
Wow.
Well, I went on and sent them a video clip of how that bit, the Hot Dogs Pyro Show, leads into testimony about growing up as the daughter of an alcoholic and about the broken relationship I had with my dad, and how at 18 I was paying the electric bill and the water bill, and I had this falling out with my dad. Told him if he didn't stop drinking that I was done. I wasn't his daughter anymore. I didn't need him. I was I was working 2 jobs at 18, and that I was leaving. I wasn't his daughter anymore if he didn't quit drinking. And he did. He actually stopped. He stopped for about 2.5 weeks. And I came home one day and there were signs. The joke is there were signs he had been drinking. Like the last time I checked, you're supposed to park in front of the porch, not on the porch.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I had this argument, Maurice, with God. I was standing at the door, and I wasn't even close with the Lord, but I was saved when I was 10 years old, and the Holy Spirit has been in me and guiding me, more than I could have ever imagined. And I remember standing at the door, and I just told God, I was like, well, that's it. I'm moving out. I'm done with these people. No, I don't need mom. I don't need dad. I don't need any of them. I would take, I'm taking care of them already. And I felt the Lord speak to my heart. And he said, you saw him yesterday. And the day before, my dad was laying on the couch in detox. He was sick. He was dying on that couch. I was 18. I didn't know about detox. I didn't know how dangerous it was. He started drinking when he was 12 years old.
Wow.
Right? At this point,
amazing.
he's 56 maybe at that point.
Uh-huh.
And the Holy Spirit said, I only know of 2 people who's ever been on this planet that were willing to die for you. One of them was laying on the couch yesterday, and the other one was my son.
Yes.
And it's interesting, June, that you will accept my son on the cross for your forgiveness, but you will not give that to your dad.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I said, okay, fine, but I'm not paying their electric bill anymore. I'm not paying the water. And, but at 18, I mean, it was still rough for a long time, but at 18, God opened my eyes to just how willing we are to accept Christ's blood, and how willing we are to, let him be on the cross for us. But when someone does us wrong, it's a whole different story, And so, and comedy, it became something that connects me and my dad in a deeper way, that gives me, and he's got to see my walk and my journey and my faith in God, and just going out and doing this thing. And he loves that I do material about him. He loves that it's a character of him. But when I tell you he is a character, anybody who's ever been around him are like, yep, that's Hot Dog. like 100%.
Yeah.
But it's connected me in this, deep and special way. And not everybody, to go back to your cancel culture, I say I am not for everybody. I'm not for everybody. Junebug's not for everybody. Hot Dog's not for everybody. But I am for somebody.
Yes.
And, when God sends you out on a mission, if the door shuts, if I get canceled, it's my Father who shut that down. There may be a man or a woman who thinks they did it.
Yeah.
But he can use them too to redirect my path. And he gets to open the doors, and he gets to close the doors, and I have to trust him with that. Now I try to always honor the Lord with my material, but it is, difficult. It can be difficult in the Christian world for the material that I want to share. And what's interesting is when I get to be somewhere that doesn't get uptight about that, when I get to do comedy at a church, and they allow me to just tell my story, man, people come up and they share about their lives and their mistakes, or their, crazy families, or like right now, some of the material I do is about finding a sister, Yeah. Hot Dog gave us a baby sister about 4 years ago, thanks to DNA testing. And,
Okay.
and a lot of people are like, but when I share that story, and of course I do it with humor, and I don't glorify extramarital affairs, but what I am really excited about is this beautiful relationship I have with a sister. His name is Hot Dog. We kind of guessed somebody maybe out there, right? Like my brother, sister, and I were not fully shocked that he was not always a faithful man, and neither was my mom. But man, when the sister came around and we found out, she was out there, just added another beautiful, layer to our lives. And when I share about it in a humorous way, I will see people in the audience look at a friend and like elbow them and be like, that's you. And then people will come up after the show now and be like, yeah, we just found out about my brother. I just found, I just met 4 cousins this week that we didn't know we were related. And it's a real part of what's going on in the world. And when we're allowed to tell our stories and just be real and honest with each other, it's a beautiful connection. It helps people heal. It helps people connect. But that can't happen when we constantly shut each other down, when it's, I'm not comfortable with this conversation, and we file hurt feelings reports, and we don't just let people truly tell their stories.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you mentioned the church kind of giving you the crickets after they had hired you to work.
Yeah.
And they get uptight. People get uptight in church. And it leads me to my next question, which is, in your mind, is there a difference between clean comedy and Christian comedy?
Oh, well, absolutely. I think as far as cleanliness level, for sure.
Yeah.
Because club clean, you can use innuendos. You can, just change the name of something to something else. There's subject matters that are open for discussion when it's club clean, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When it's family clean, that's more of a Christian clean comedy show. That, a lot of times, like, comics who say they work clean, they think they can do a church, and then they want to go to church and start talking about, intimate relationship with their spouse or whatever, and don't realize, that's not appropriate here. That's not what we're not doing that, right?
That's not what we meant by family friendly, guys.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, I think a lot of people think, I call myself a Christian comedian because that's what God called me, like straight
Amen.
out of the gate when he called me into doing this. But I think it can confuse people a little bit because they have a perception of what a Christian comedian is.
Right.
And I don't do church culture jokes. There's a lot of people that are Christian comedians that go to churches, and they do jokes about the nursery, and they do jokes about VBS, and they do Noah's Ark jokes, and Bible jokes and those kind of things. I don't do any of that.
Yeah.
There's none of that is in my in my set, because I didn't grow up in that culture. I call myself a Christian comedian because that's what God called me, and that's how I want to operate, and that's the standard that I'm held to, especially when I call myself that. That's what other people have expectations of. I'm not just a clean comedian, and any opportunity that I can combine comedy and sharing Christ with people, that's my favorite. I tell people at the end of my set, in my closer, I do a joke about how someone comes up to me and says, well, they told me you're a Christian. And I say, I am. So by the time I get off the stage, everybody knows that I'm a Christian.
Yes.
They'll always know I'm doing clean because that's what I do. But when I first started told people I was a Christian comedian, there's a lady I worked with. She was from a different country, and we were in the teacher's lounge, and she goes, I want to ask you a question. And I said, yeah. And she goes, Christian comedian? Do you make jokes about Jesus? And she honestly thought that's what a Christian comedian is. We just do jokes about Jesus. And I was like, no, I don't make fun of Jesus ever. But there's definitely a difference. Not long ago, I was at an event. There was a comedian who was like, hey, will you watch my set? And I think I'm working clean. But will you let me know if you think I'm working clean? And I'm like, well, clean for what? Because she does mostly clubs and, bar shows and secular events. And I'm like, I mean, you're pretty much clean for that. But if you're asking me like church wise, No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like 90% of what you just said, you're not going to say in a church.
Exactly. And I think there has to be a difference between club clean and being in the church Christian clean.
Yeah.
And there are just certain subjects that, the churches, they're not ready for, and they don't want to get. So it's just best to just stay away from that. And I think in 2024 we'll talk about cancel culture, and I'll ask you one more question regarding this. And you may have touched on it already, but I'll throw it out. Do you think it's more difficult for a Christian comedian to thrive in today's culture than a secular comedian?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, just all the way around from top to bottom. I mean, if you're willing to compromise, you can probably get a little bit farther in a secular world that's about compromising.
Right.
If you're willing to compromise your faith, where you're willing to go, what you're willing to say, what you're willing to do, then yeah, I mean, we're called to be set apart. So I don't know that it's my goal to be an A-lister comedian in a compromising world. And also I don't see success. I don't think, I mean, literally when I got into this, I was in a discussion with a lot of people talking about how many people come to their shows and how much money they're making and being household names. And we gotta get out there and get ourselves in this spot and this, whatever. And so I just went to the Lord and I'm like, God, what is success? I just prayed, started reading, and I started seeing the number one, just one. The one is enough for God. I was a success.
Amen.
The day that I proclaimed Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, that I was a success. Anything after that is just icing on the cake, man. Like, for when I said yes to the Lord, when it came to the calling on my life, and I still keep saying yes. I keep going out, even when, man, Drybar was amazing. It was fun. It was awesome. Hopefully the special, people love it and have a great time with it. But there's also the times that you go and you've put everything into it, and you get crickets from the audience, or you don't get the gig, or you get looked over because you aren't compromising, right? So, to me, success is saying yes to God, and not whether there's 800 people, 80 people, or even 8 in the audience. Am I doing what he called me to do? Am I sharing the gift that he's given me? Because one person is important to him. He's not, if he tells me to write a book, it doesn't have to be a bestseller to be a success. If he told me to do it, success. I did it. Yes, Absolutely. Father, I did it. Right. So I think, in the secular world, a Christian comedian can have a much more difficult time, but we should, because we're not supposed to fit in the world. We're supposed to be different. We're supposed to stand out. And if everybody loves me, I'm probably not doing something right.
Yes. And I think that it's definitely, particularly coming out of COVID, more difficult for the Christian comedian to thrive. But again, if it's an uphill battle, if it's, man, I got to dig deeper, I've really got to get ready for a possible backlash, that means you're doing something right for Christ.
Yeah.
And so, we do have a bigger job as Christian comedians up there, because we're up there to change lives.
Yeah.
That's the reason that we're up there. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks, and also radio QDX.com out of Lucama, North Carolina, and KCHF-TV 11 out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We are talking with comedian June Vaughn Colson on the Maurice Brown Comedy Show. This has been a great conversation, June. Usually whenever I discuss comedy with you, there's just not enough time. Yes. So I do want to ask you about the advice that you can give a young person out there in light of the fact, and I'm talking about a Christian comedian, clean comedian, so just starting out, and they're like, you know what, I want to do this. I want to be like June Colson. I want to be a stand-up comic. That's what I want to do with my life. I want a career doing that. What kind of advice can you leave with a young person with that with that desire?
You know, at the LOLGCA, not this last conference, but the conference before, they asked me to come and speak. And I would apply this to anything, whether it's comedy, whether, you know, if someone thinks that they want to be a pilot or, you know, a doctor or a radio DJ. I'm learning to find out if I have a good idea or if it's God's idea.
Okay.
Comedy is hard. We know that. Man, it can be brutal. It seems like you know, just a goofy fun. We get a laugh and hang out, and no, you're writing and you're writing and you're writing. It's an industry of no. You get a lot of no. It's a slow going pace. I wish God would have told me that it was as slow as molasses to, you know, to get into this thing.
Yeah.
But when you're going with God's idea, not just a good idea, then that's what gives you the strength to continue. That's what helps you, whether, like I said, whether it's an airline pilot or if you want to be a doctor or whatever you want to do, I say be in prayer about it, and then get close to the people who are doing what you want to do. Build genuine relationships, not, you know, people in all industries try to get connected to the big dogs because they think that that's who is going to elevate them to the next level. That's going to be their big break. I say build real and genuine friendships with people who are doing what you want to do. Make sure that this is a path that God wants you to be on, because he's going to provide. When he told me to go, right, he put people like Jeff Allen in my path and a table full of professional comedians for me to sit with and learn. He gave me the CCA. I didn't have to go out and scrape and fight and use people and June bug people. I wasn't bugging anybody to figure out how to do this thing. You know, God puts those people in place for you, and he will confirm. Just like, you know, it was my birthday weekend and it was an hour from my house. And now I get to host that retreat every year now that I was scared to death to go to, but it's because God put me on that path. If you know it's comedy and you know that this is a gift that God's calling you to use, find the people that are doing it the way that you want to do it, in a way that honors God. Start writing, write every single day, and pray, and just be in prayer. Look for the opportunities. You know, I've done so many gigs for free. I've done some that I'm like, whoa, wow, they're going to pay me that, you know? Let the Lord lead you even when it comes to that. I know some people are like, I don't work for less than. Well, you know, I do have. Today somebody asked me, you know, what would you charge to come and do 30 minutes for whatever? And I told them where I start. But I've also had events where someone's come to me and I just felt God say, just do this. It doesn't matter what the budget is. I'll fill in the gap.
Yes.
And I've gone and done it. And he's never, the lights are still on, you know, I still get to move forward and do this thing. So just surround yourself with people that you know are doing it the right way, in ways that honor God. Continue to be in prayer and write, and have fun with it. Have some fun. This can be really, really fun.
Well, you know, and that's the key. It's fun. You know, and you would do it for free. And when you're starting out, you do a lot of it for free.
Yes, you do.
And then so that you got to love this, by gosh, if you're going to keep doing this for free. And all of a sudden, you know, you start getting paid and people start appreciating your work. You start, you know, coupling or partnering with people that are heavier hitters, if not flat out heavy hitters in the industry. So great advice, June. I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with comedian June Vaughn Colson. She just completed shooting a Drybar comedy special. in Provo, Utah, recently here over the past week or so, and I would imagine we would expect that to drop. I would maybe at the end of the year or next.
Yeah, they said like 6 to 9 months. But I will tell you, hopefully in the in between, I got to film a special in August with Killer Bees on the Comedy Buzz. That'll be on Amazon Prime, so keep your eyes out for that as well. And we were talking about the secular world. Killer Bees has been in secular comedy for years. His family is so on fire for God in the last several years, and he specifically did a clean comedy special. And it's set to go on Amazon Prime. It's in post-production. So that's the Comedy Buzz with Killer Bees. And I am one of the comedians that got to record. I recorded at the Stardome in Birmingham, Alabama in August. And hopefully that'll be out sometime soon too.
I love it. June Vaughn Colson also opens up for the Mike Huckabee shows from time to time. And also will be hooking up with comedian Jeff Allen in Paducah, Kentucky this summer, and I believe that's going to be in July. So be on the lookout for June Colson, a very funny lady. And I want to thank you once again, June, my good friend, for being on the show. May the peace of Christ continue to be with your fabulous career and your family. God bless you.
Thank you, Maurice. It's always a pleasure.